In Nagoya, Korean woman Jungin is having lunch when suddenly, an earthquake hits the area, causing her to panic and rush outside. In the streets, she encounters another Korean person, Do-yoon, who is recording the whole deal. Seeing how scared she is, Do-yoon takes her to a special house built by a seismic design architect, making it the safest place in Japan. Earthquakes are Do-yoon's field of work, and Jungin has come to Japan to learn new cooking techniques. The two of them bond over tea, and when Jungin gets scared thinking another earthquake is coming when it's actually her vibrating phone, Do-yoon finds her charming and invites her to lunch as he mentions she's beautiful. Do-yoon and Jungin spend all their time in Japan together and become a very happy couple, eventually getting married. 7 years later, however, things aren't jovial anymore. Jungin has become a very grumpy woman, constantly complaining about every little thing and hating on anything under the sun. Whenever the newspaper boy comes by every morning because they have a subscription, she picks fights with him because he ignores the no newspaper sign, even calling him names. She does cook wonderful meals for Do-yoon, but she barely allows him to speak because she goes on lengthy rants, and even follows him to the bathroom to keep on talking to him. She also gets extra grumpy whenever someone points out they still don't have kids. Tired of her, Do-yoon has tried to mention the idea of breaking up, but when he does, Jungin throws a fit and Do-yoon takes it back. One morning at work, Do-yoon hears about a position out of state that would be the perfect opportunity to get away from Jungin. Unfortunately, there's another employee that also wants the position, and the company will have to think about who deserves it more. Do-yoon ends up getting on his knees to beg his coworker to let him take the position, and he wins. He gives Jungin the news over dinner at a fancy restaurant, telling her it's not necessary for her to visit more than once a month, and pointing out how he's doing this to provide for her, which helps get her less angry. When they get home, Jungin wants to get busy on the table and Do-yoon refuses, only to change his mind when she mentions going to visit him more often at work. Some days later, Do-yoon moves to the countryside to start his new job. There, he gets to reconnect with his old friend Song, who works at the local radio with DJ Choi. When he goes to his new house in the evening, he can't help noticing there are women crying by his neighbor's door. The most shocking surprise, though, is that Jungin is in the house waiting for him. She's decided to move here with him as a way to start over, since their relationship's obviously having some trouble. The next day, Do-yoon learns there will be a welcome party and that employees are supposed to bring their spouses, so now Do-yoon must think of something to stop Jungin from going. When he returns home, he notices heartbroken women of all nationalities going again after his neighbor Sung-ki, who calls himself a Casanova. Afterward, Do-yoon tells Jungin about the party, and seeing as she hates those kinds of parties, he offers to tell his boss that she's sick. Jungin refuses though, because she thinks it's her duty to support him, so a desperate Do-yoon throws a soapy plate on the floor to make her slip and break her leg. The night of the party, Do-yoon apologizes to his boss, mentioning his wife is sadly in a cast, but Jungin shocks him by showing up anyway, supporting herself on a crutch. She's well-mannered when she meets the boss, but when she goes inside to mingle with the other wives, things don't go well. The other wives judge her for her heavy makeup and her lack of kids, so Jungin gets irritated and causes a scene where she accidentally pulls the tablecloth with her crutch and breaks a bunch of stuff. Do-yoon sends her home in a taxi, but she keeps crying and ranting to him through her phone, only stopping to argue with the driver. When Jungin gets home, she notices Sung-ki is on the roof, considering ending things, and Jungin calls the police to report a murder. Moments later at the station, all the women are waiting outside while Sung-ki gives his statement to an officer, and Jungin scolds him for not thinking his life is precious. Do-yoon comes over to pick up Jungin, and one of the cops warns him about Sung-ki. He's well known in town for being a Casanova that women can't resist, so Do-yoon should keep him away from his wife. Do-yoon leaves his card under Sung-ki's door every day until he agrees to see him. The men meet at the beach, and Do-yoon makes his request. He wants Sung-ki to seduce Jungin to make her ask for a divorce. Unfortunately, Sung-ki refuses, explaining that since he lost his true love Poppy he hasn't been capable of loving again, so he would end up breaking Jungin's heart. Do-yoon doesn't care, knowing she'll get over it, thus Sung-ki begins considering accepting the job. First though, he needs to see Jungin out and about to have a better idea of her, which means Do-yoon will have to get her a job. Some days later, Choi and Song receive Jungin for an interview after Do-yoon asked them for a favor. They like Jungin's rants because they could make for a funny section in their show, but Jungin asks for triple the pay, so Do-yoon will have to pay the difference to keep her busy. Afterward, Jungin and Do-yoon go to a local cafe to celebrate her new job. While Do-yoon is inside making their order, Sung-ki takes the chance to approach Jun-in with some flowers that surprisingly make her smile. The next day, Jungin debuts on the radio with her segment Afternoon Crasher, which is heard by Sung-ki and Do-yoon's co-workers. Then Do-yoon meets with Sung-ki, who has come to the conclusion that Jungin is a very complicated woman, so if he does this, he wants double the money, which Do-yoon accepts to pay. Sung-ki's first attack is to walk by the house only wearing a tank top, but Jungin finds him creepy instead of attractive. Sung-ki takes this personally and finds a challenge in Jungin, so now he wants to do it for his own pride. He meets with Do-yoon again to ask him to make a list of every single thing he knows about Jungin, and in return, Do-yoon asks him not to get physical with his wife. With all this information, Sung-ki prepares his house for his plan, and one afternoon, he pretends to be throwing out a bunch of china. Jungin sees him and tries to stop him because the china is in a good state, and Sung-ki cries to make her feel bad about her constant meddling. It works, and Jungin invites him to her home for coffee. After chatting a bit, Sung-ki leaves while forgetting the box with the china on purpose. Jungin goes to his house to give it back, and Sung-ki invites her to have a drink, impressing her by showing they have many interests in common and not minding how outspoken she is. Days pass and Jungin continues to work at the radio. Her segment is a total success, earning the radio lots of comments on their site when in the old days they would only get one spam bot, not to speak of the amazing ratings. Jungin begins to hang out a lot with Sung-ki, who often picks her up at work and takes her on a variety of dates while reminding her there's nothing wrong with liking someone as a person without needing to get intimate. However, Sung-ki pushes naughty thoughts into her mind whenever he can, like the time he teaches her how to milk a cow by putting his arms around her and whispering in her ear. Jungin is smiling more now than she did for the last 7 years, and after she comments on the cow incident, Do-yoon begins getting worried and decides to follow them during their next date. Sung-ki and Jungin are on a carousel at an abandoned amusement park when Sung-ki notices Do-yoon spying on them, so he excuses himself for a moment to drag Do-yoon into the Ferris wheel. There, the men get into a fight, but Sung-ki manages to convince Do-yoon to trust him because Jungin is almost wrapped around his little finger. He just needs a little more time. Later that night, Do-yoon comes home to see Jungin hasn't made dinner as usual because she's too busy writing something for work. She's in such a good mood that she's constantly smiling and humming. She even goes as far as to play some music to dance to. Do-yoon ends up joining her, only for her to stop the music in order to tell him how much she misses their happy days in Japan with tears in her eyes. When she asks for a kiss, Do-yoon gives it to her even if he knows he shouldn't. Sung-ki had asked him to stay cold to make the process faster. The couple ends up getting busy on the living room floor, only to be interrupted by a phone call that causes Jungin to interrupt their fun and leave the house. She says it's for work, but she actually goes out with Sung-ki. Sometime later, Jungin and Do-yoon have dinner with Choi and Song. Choi has big news. They've been invited to go to Seoul and appear on the public radio, which is a huge opportunity for the whole country to meet her. Song accidentally lets slip that she and Do-yoon used to date and they meet each other nowadays as friends. After dinner, Jungin confronts Do-yoon about this since she didn't know, causing Do-yoon to snap at her. She usually hates all his friends and he refuses to be a shut-in like her, that's why he never said anything. Feeling insulted, Jungin wonders if they need a divorce before announcing she'll go to Seoul alone. Later, Do-yoon meets Sung-ki to thank him, but Sung-ki tells him it's too soon to tell. Do-yoon's living alone now so he tells Sung-ki his job is over, but Sung-ki decides he'll keep going for free. This is his final seduction and his reputation is at stake. The next day, Do-yoon is happy to wake up alone while Jungin begins working hard in Seoul. Now she's able to go around town making interviews where she catches people doing immoral things and tries to make them talk on national radio. Each day that passes makes Do-yoon realize he may miss her after all, especially when he can't cook for himself. One night, Jungin appears at his place driving her own car, which she bought without telling him. She's brought him some food and an apology for being mean the other day, but she finally admits she's got some problems and these new experiences are helping her work through them. Then she hugs and admits she's been having dreams about another man, but it's the first time since they got married. Afterward, Jungin goes on a date with Sung-ki. Deciding to finally open up more, she tells him that being married to Do-yoon was supposed to be enough, but not managing to have children frustrated the heck out of her, and seeing as she failed whenever she put effort into something, she decided to stop trying. In return, Sung-ki tells her about losing Poppy to the ocean. Meanwhile at home, Do-yoon tries to call Sung-ki, but he won't pick up. He decides he needs to get drunk, and when he grabs the bottle, he finds an old message from Jungin. The note says that if he's drinking is because he must be feeling lonely, so perhaps this is the moment when he'll finally hear her out. Jungin wants to go to the hospital and try again because it's time to stop being scared and build a family. This message is enough to make Do-yoon get in his car and drive all the way to see her. Meanwhile, Sung-ki is walking Jungin home. The two of them almost kiss, and Jungin admits she's had naughty dreams of him, so Sung-ki tells her it's finally time for him to let her go, leaving her in tears. All this is seen by Do-yoon, who almost runs Sung-ki over with his car when he crosses the street. Desperate, Do-yoon asks Sung-ki to drop the plan because he wants his wife back. She's a much more cheerful person now that she's working and going out. However, Sung-ki he's fallen in love with Jungin as well. He throws Do-yoon on top of the car and refuses to give up, telling him that if Do-yoon tries to get her back, Sung-ki will tell her about their plan. Once Sung-ki leaves, Do-yoon visits Jungin to tell her he misses her and wants her back. Jungin doesn't pay much attention to him because she's got a killing hangover, and their conversation is interrupted by an earthquake that requires Do-yoon to go to the office. Afterward, all that Do-yoon can do is try to find Sung-ki to stop him, because he isn't in the house next door anymore. One morning, he finds one of the many women crying at Sung-ki's door. When he mentions Sung Ki has moved out, the woman says she'll go to his other home, and Do-yoon gets the address out of her by promising revenge for breaking her heart. Some hours later, Jungin, Choi, and Song travel to a fancy penthouse apartment, following an anonymous tip that told them about a Casanova that broke the hearts of hundreds of women. Jungin is shocked to discover this Casanova is Sung Ki but decides to do the interview anyway, prompting Sung Ki to share his story while making beautiful art with sand. He's never told any woman that he loved them, he's always broken up with them gently and they never took it well. After he lost Poppy to the ocean, Sung Ki thought love was a cage and he wanted to punish anyone that believed in it, but that became useless as well and that's when he thought about ending things. However, he then met Jungin, who made him believe in love again. Crying, Jungin decides not to put this in the air while Song calls Do-yoon to tell him Jungin is over hills over this Casanova dude. After work, Do-yoon rushes to meet Jungin at their old home. She tells him she's considering going back to the countryside, but right now she doesn't want to talk about it. However, Do-yoon pushes by mentioning Sung Ki, and when Jungin gets defensive, Do-yoon admits he paid him to spend time with her, so everything she's seen in him is a lie. Crying, Jungin begins yelling at him, upset for making her feel like nobody has ever truly loved her, and pushing him away when he thinks he can solve this by mentioning he's ready to go back to the hospital to have that baby. An earthquake interrupts their fight, and Do-yoon tries to tell her it's fine, but Jungin confesses she doesn't feel safe here. The next day, Jungin announces on the show that she's quitting. For her last rant, she complains about cowards that don't speak their minds and tells the story of a loser that paid a man to seduce his wife. People say she says too many negative things, but she thinks that's better than silence, and it was her way to keep the house lively while living a miserable life. Nobody should be used to silence, and that's why she's also announcing her divorce. After the show, Jungin goes to the beach to do some thinking and finds Sung Ki walking into the ocean. She takes him out before things got bad and calls the police to give them a ride. In the car, Jungin tells Sung Ki that she had been attracted to him, but it's time for him to let Poppy go. When they arrive at their station, Do-yoon is waiting for them, wanting to talk things through with Jungin, but she reminds him he doesn't like talking to her, so she's moving out to an apartment that she's rented with their savings. Sung Ki laughs at the whole deal, and later at the beach, he explains to Do-yoon that the only thing he had done was treat Jungin like a woman again. Perhaps he needs to remember that after earthquakes, people need to rebuild from the scratch. The next day, Do-yoon shows up at the house to help Jungin pack. When the delivery boy tosses the newspaper at them again, this time is Do-yoon the one to come out to argue with him in defense of his wife's sign. Seeing this, Jungin accepts to spend one last night in the house. She takes the bed while Do-yoon stays in the living room, but in the middle of the night, Jungin decides to lay down with her husband. When Do-yoon wakes up in the morning, she's already gone. 1 month later, Do-yoon and Jungin meet at the lawyer's office to sign the divorce papers. While waiting, he asks her why she had smiled when Sung Ki gave her flowers the first time, and Jungin admits it was because Sung Ki's words had reminded her of what Do-yoon said the first time they met in Japan. Their conversation is interrupted by a lawyer telling them they're resuming work after lunch, so after Do-yoon complains to them over the wait, he asks Jungin to go have lunch together. At the restaurant, Do-yoon complains again, this time to the waitress about a problem with the dishes. Jungin scolds him for being mean to the staff, and Do-yoon admits missing her criticism. He explains he finally understands she's behaved like that because she was lonely and now he's going through the same, making Jungin smile. Suddenly, Jungin thinks an earthquake is hitting them again and hides under the table, so Do-yoon takes the chance to join her and repeat the words he said the day they met as a way to ask her to start over. Later when the lawyers call their names, neither of them is at the office. Meanwhile, Sung Ki has taken over Jungin's spot on the radio show, offering relationship advice. He's so good that Song can't help jumping on him right there in the middle of the studio floor. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.